Good morning. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. In today's update, we have breaking news this morning. The Duke of Edinburgh has been admitted to a London hospital. Prince Philip's doctor advised him to check in last night as a precautionary measure when a 99-year-old said he wasn't feeling well. He's expected to stay there for a few days. Buckingham Palace says this is not related to COVID-19. We will keep you updated on his condition. At least 37 states from Texas to New York are on alert as new snow moves in. The hard-hit South is now bracing for more heavy snow, dangerous ice, and possible tornadoes. Millions of Americans are still without power from the last storm, struggling to keep warm in the freezing cold. Parts of Texas, which is seeing the bulk of the power outage, have hit record low temperatures not seen in a century. At least 20 people have died, and the weather's also complicating the COVID vaccine rollout. At least 22 states are canceling or delaying vaccinations. And FEMA is planning to open a total of 7 mass vaccination sites by next week. Nearly 12% of the population has gotten at least one dose of the vaccine so far, but there are new concerns over a condition linked to COVID and kids. Cases of a rare inflammatory syndrome found in children after they've had the virus are on the rise. It could cause inflammation in the heart, lungs, brain, and other vital organs. More than 2,000 cases have been reported since May, and 30 kids have died. Doctors still stress, though, that the syndrome is rare. And it's only happened 27 times in our nation's history, but we could soon see a new constitutional amendment. It aims to grant equal rights for women under the Constitution and was passed by Congress 50 years ago. Now we finally have enough states on board to ratify the amendment, but is it too late? Our Devin Dwyer has a closer look.
Nearly 50 years after Congress passed the Equal Rights Amendment, there's still no mention of women in the U.S. Constitution.
Do you think this marching is going to impress the men inside this building?
Yes, I do, and I hope so, because now is the time.
For decades, the ERA has been stuck in a political purgatory, just 3 states short of the 38 ratifications needed to make it official. Deadlines have come and gone. Women have kept marching.
Sexual violence has got to go.
The language of the amendment is straightforward but far-reaching, stating that equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Advocates say those words are primed to finally become law at a critical time.
Here we are 50 years later fighting the same battle all over again. I want to stop that.
Professor Deepa Kumar says despite years of progress, gender discrimination is still very real.
I was started off with a very good salary. And the problem, though, is that that salary level did not keep up.
She was hired in 2004 as a professor at Rutgers University, the same school where in 1969, a young law professor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, won a settlement over unequal pay for female faculty. Kumar and 4 other women professors sued the school again last year.
I mean, I felt like I'm being treated like a second-class citizen. It was hurtful. It was humiliating. If I could be treated this way, what about people who don't have job security?
Rutgers would not comment on Kumar's case, but tells ABC News it's creating a new pay equity program and is committed to resolving outstanding pay equity requests as quickly and responsibly as possible. On average, women in the U.S. earn just 82 cents for every dollar earned by men. The gap even wider for women of color. Experts say the pandemic is threatening to make that pay inequality even worse.
You look at what's happening with women across the workforce in this country right now because of COVID. Women's, inequality has exacerbated. You look at the job loss for women. I mean, it is a palpable feeling.
More than 2.3 million women have left the workforce since the pandemic began, including another 275,000 just last month. January marked the lowest labor force participation rate for women in more than 30 years.
I was actually in the middle of feeding my daughter when this bill came up.
California Assemblywoman Buffy Wicks became a symbol of the crisis last fall when she was forced to take her infant daughter to the State House floor in order to do her job.
What you're going to see happening, I fear, is women coming out of the workforce because of the pandemic, and their male counterparts are moving up in the ladder at work, and they're moving down, and then they're going to have to re-enter the workforce, and they're going to be this far behind. So that pay inequity will increase again over time.
What do you think the fix is?
And if we enshrine the ERA into the Constitution, that guarantees equity and equality for women across this country.
Advocates argue the amendment would give a constitutional basis for women to fight back against pay inequality.
It's very important, to actually have law that allows women to challenge the injustice and the discrimination that they're facing so that, it's equal pay for equal work for all.
Congress voted in 1972 with overwhelming bipartisan majorities to approve the ERA. 35 states quickly voted to ratify the amendment, but it wasn't until last year that Virginia became the final state required of a 3/4 majority to make it official. There was just one problem.
Congress, in its infinite wisdom, decided to put a deadline on passing it. Very paternalistic.
That deadline was in 1982, the ERA failing to hit the mark after conservative activist Phyllis Schlafly led a movement of women in opposition. With Democrats in control in Washington and a record number of women in Congress, the movement sees a new opening. Congresswoman Jackie Speer of California and more than 200 lawmakers from both parties have sponsored a bill to remove the deadline for ERA ratification and allow it to become law.
We do have momentum in a way that we haven't had probably for decades. There is no deadline on equality, and it's about time we recognize it.
The Biden administration says enacting the ERA is a centerpiece of its agenda for women, but major legal hurdles still remain. A U.S. Justice Department analysis last year concluded that Congress may not revive a proposed amendment after the deadline has expired. Even Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg conceded before her death that the process would need to start over.
The ERA fell 3 states short of ratification. I hope someday it will be put back in the political hopper, starting over again.
Many ERA advocates argue that legal analysis is flawed.
There are many constitutional scholars that argue that it's unconstitutional to put a deadline in a constitutional amendment.
If this becomes the newest amendment, what happens?
There has been discrimination. It's around pay, it's around pregnancy, and it's around violence against women. So those are the areas that will be impacted.
Is it your sense that some of the legal challenges that women have been bringing will continue to bring? Would those cases be easier, in effect, if this was in the Constitution?
Absolutely. No question about it.
A push to root out discrimination backed by the power of the Constitution.
Do you think this is the moment it's going to happen?
I think this is the moment it's going to happen.
As millions of American women say the time has come to get it done.
And Devin Dwyer joins us now with more on this. Devin, the Equal Rights Amendment has still not been ratified. So who's opposed to it and why?
Well, Dan, you're not going to find anybody come out and say they're opposed to equal rights for women these days. But there are two camps really opposed to this amendment. There are the social conservatives, those who fear that putting this measure in place would strip away some of our gender designations in society, say for bathrooms, locker rooms, women's sports leagues, men's sports leagues, and the like. They're also concerned that it could embolden anti-abortion activists, or rather pro-abortion supporters, to lift all restrictions on abortion in this country. And there's also a worry, particularly among the so-called fathers' rights movement, that this could challenge some of those preferential laws that protect women in specific states, things over child custody and alimony, that those state laws that exist on the books supporting women could go away. So there are a lot of arguments, a lot of fear-mongering, if you listen to advocates of the ERA that's out there on the social issues. And then there's the constitutional questions. We got into some of those in the piece. You know, those deadlines were missed, back in 1982. That's really unclear as to whether some of those state ratifications are still valid. And then there are 5 states, Diane, that over the past few years have actually tried to rescind their ratifications. So really a lot of confusion over what the numbers actually mean, whether that's actually legal, and who gets to decide whether this becomes law. But the movement, as you see there, is full steam ahead, and they have the support right now of the White House and Democratic leadership in Congress.
And walk me through that process of these states trying to rescind the ratification. One, why are they doing that? And two, what does that mean for the prospects of this moving forward?
Yeah, well, it's politics at play. Several of these states, many of them happened in the late 1970s and 80s. They voted to rescind it. It's only happened a couple times in our history. The 27 amendments that we have, in fact, in the 1860s, 2 states tried to rescind their ratification of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. I'll spare you the details, but that was rejected. They said they can't rescind that. But it's an untested legal theory, much in the same way that this impeachment process we just went through of a former president was sort of uncharted waters. We're in the same thing with this amendment. And so what is likely to happen if you listen to supporters is that they want this to get on the books. They want to move forward. Perhaps there could be court challenges down the line if the 28th Amendment is invoked in a legal case. But as of right now, they believe they have the 38 states required to make it official.
And in the piece, Devin, you talk about the wage gap between men and women. What are some other issues that advocates are hoping this amendment will help them fight?
Yeah, there's actually an interesting sub-movement, Diane, behind the ERA campaign. It describes itself as advocates for menstrual equality in this country, taking an opposition to the so-called tampon tax that exists in the United States. If you haven't heard of it, well, you're not alone. I hadn't heard of it until reporting this piece, and that is the point, these advocates say. It's not a specific tax on tampons, but it's the fact that feminine hygiene products are actually not exempt from sales tax in 33 of the 50 states. Meanwhile, things like sunscreen, chapstick, Viagra for men, shampoo, those sorts of things are considered necessities and exempt from sales tax. Why is it that these hygiene products, which are critical for so many women, are being taxed? Well, if you ask President Obama, who is one of the supporters of this movement, he said it's because men wrote the tax laws in these countries. What does this have to do with the ERA? Well, advocates will tell you that enacting a new amendment to the Constitution wouldn't get rid of the tampon tax per se, but it would help set a national standard that could, in the very near future, see some of these unequal tax laws revised.
So Viagra is a necessity, tampons are not. That's an interesting one. Devin Dwyer, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
And proponents of the ERA have been working for decades now to get it ratified. One of those advocates, the president of the ERA Coalition, Carol Jenkins, joins me now. Carol, welcome. Thanks for being here. We just heard from Devin some of the major legal hurdles still ahead for the ERA. Why do you think now is the right time to take them on?
Well, I think we've been working on this for 100 years, and the question that we continue to ask at the ERA Coalition is, what is it about America that does not want an amendment that says you cannot discriminate based on sex? It's an extraordinary repeat of Alice Paul trying to get the vote for women, and now we have this century-long fight in America for equality based on sex that was not included in our United States Constitution. If we're looking for the root of sexism and racism in our country, we have to look straight at the Constitution. That's where it lies. That's the root of it. The Constitution was written by slave-holding men who refused to even put women in the Constitution, much less anyone else that didn't fall into the white male purview. So we've dealt with this since the beginning of our society. We see that we still have inequities. We have pay inequities, of course, that Devin so wonderfully talked about in his piece. And thank you, Devin, for that great piece. But we also have to look at things like poverty. Most of the poor of this country are women trying to feed their children and house their children, even if they're partners in a relationship where there are two breadwinners. The fact that they don't still make what a man makes is detrimental to life in this country. So the good news for America is that we have met the requirements for passing an amendment. The only thing stipulated in Article 5 of the Constitution is passage by Congress. That happened in 1972, and ratification by 38 states. It took us a while, but that happened last year on January 27th. Of 2020. So we are actually in the midst of the clock ticking. On January 27th of 2022, the ERA becomes a reality. And of course, we do have that problematic thing of the time limit that we are still dealing with, but we're in Congress, we're in court, and we now have a wonderfully supportive administration that has stipulated from its campaigns and in all of its agenda items now that it expects to put the Equal Rights Amendment in place. So we think that this is the year, 2021 is the year where we resolve this controversy.
Now, given this deadline from Congress that this had to have been passed by, I think it was 1982, could this mean that you have to start from scratch?
We don't think so, and we adore Ruth Bader Ginsburg. One of our heroes of our movement, always an extraordinarily supportive person for the Equal Rights Amendment. She said if she could see any amendment passed, she would want it to be the Equal Rights Amendment, and she has suggested that we need to start over again. And what we say at the ERA Coalition is that, sure, we can. It would probably take us another 100 years before we get something as simple as you cannot discriminate based on sex in the Constitution. Can you imagine, with the Congress the way it is now, so fractured, getting 2/3 of an agreement on anything, much less equality for women, and then sending it out to the states and getting 38 states? So sure. As a coalition, we have worked on that, and Carolyn Maloney, the chair of the Oversight Commission, has for years introduced a bill that we support that would effectively start over because the language is changed. We could do that. But we are trying to honor the effort of Alice Paul, who in 1923, after she did the Voting Rights Act, said that there was one more thing that was missing from our society. And she was so right, because if you look at the inequities that we have, we've thrown everything at it. Money, energy, time, all kinds of brilliant ideas on how to create an equal playing field in this country. And we have not succeeded. We've made progress for sure. So we've got to amend the Constitution. It's been amended 27 times before, when people have discovered, oh, yeah, we need this, we need that. And now this fight over saying that you cannot discriminate based on account of sex, you're telling me that it's already taken 100 years and we should start over and do another 100 years. So our great-great-granddaughters might enjoy this kind of equality when we know that the public, we've done our research, our polls indicate 90+% of Americans say, of course, women should have the same rights. There should be no discrimination based on sex. But this small group of legislators who have managed to keep it at bay for these many years, is about to change. We know that we have a new Senate, we have a new administration, we have a new Department of Justice, and we believe that this is the year where we can absolutely make this happen.
And Carol, I want to address some of the criticisms because, we heard Devin talk about some fears that this could backfire in a way, that the ERA could maybe cause the repeal of laws that favor women in certain aspects, like child custody cases. And then there's the other camp that just says, we don't need this. The 14th Amendment already protects women, and so do many other laws on the books. So why do we need this amendment?
Well, we need it because there is no basic fundamental constitutional statement about the equality of the sexes. And I might add that this also includes LGBTQ. Based on the recent Supreme Court decision, we're talking about sex, the language of the amendment talks about sex. It doesn't say let's put women in the Constitution. It just says discrimination based on sex would be something that would require some sort of recourse or punishment. I think if we look around, the explanation that we already have laws on the books that take care of this, well, I want to know, why are we still in the same situation that we've been in for many years, where there is rampant pay equity, rampant pregnancy discrimination, rampant violence against women without proper recourse? Tell me what's holding that up. And as far as we are concerned, it is that there is no fundamental constitutional rights provisions for there to be recourse and punishment for violating the rights based on sex. So I think a lot of the things that we talk about could be fixed by the ERA, because the three parts of this are: number one, there should be no discrimination based on sex. Number two, there should be a 2-year waiting period before it goes into effect, as we are gloriously in, and we soon will be out of next year. And the third part is that it gives the ability to create the laws that we need to put equal rights into effect. And therefore, people are already looking at the laws that they would want to create that would actually be the underpinning of equality of the sexes in the United States of America. So it's more than just that one. I mean, we like to say, too, it's a very simple amendment, but it also has power in it, and it gives us the power. I don't know. I mean, I love this idea of feeding hungry children, creating a law that would, as is proposed now in the Congress, where children who are starving and have no, and that's 1 out of 3 children in America, who don't have enough food. Let's create a law that feeds the children of the women and the men, because it's not just women that will benefit, it's men as well.
All right, Carol Jenkins, president of the ERA Coalition. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Devin, for the great report.
We will relay. And that does it for this ABC News Live update. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for joining us. And remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. I'll see you back here at 3 p.m. Eastern with Terry Moran for The Breakdown.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.